Good morning, America. Welcome back to Taxes Made Easy. This is the start of another wonderful week, and want to thank everybody for watching either on live or on rebroadcast here on smartmoneyculture.tv. So we talked a lot about the offer and compromise program. We've really kind of gone through the financials. Now we're going to get into more of the nitty gritty. One of the biggest questions people ask or call about are collection actions. My bank account's gotten levied. My wages have been seized and frozen. What do I do about these? How do I deal with these? And tax liens. Those are the three biggest collection actions that IRS and states take. So we're going to walk through step by step what you need to know to stop this collection activity. So we'll be back after a short break. And welcome back, everybody. Hubert Johnson here with Guardian Tax Law, talking about taxes made easy. So we're going to talk about the fun stuff. Everything's fun, right? But this is where the rubber really hits the road and people really need immediate assistance. So usually we try not to use pressure sells. If you talk to someone that's trying to pressure sell you into something, usually they're not going to be a great company. But in certain circumstances, if you have a bank levy, you have a wage garnishment, the heat's on, you need immediate help. And don't wait too long, because there have been times I have told people, I can't help you. You've waited too long. So when I can't help you, you've really waited too long, and now you're in a much worse situation. So how do you get in this position in the first place? The IRS, by law, has to send you letters and notices before you can even get to this point. Now, the IRS is moving faster than ever on these cases. It used to take a year to two, but one of the big changes with this administration has been they are moving faster than ever to take collection actions on tax debt. So people that filed their tax return by October of 2022, we're already seeing them with final notices of intent to levy, and they're getting to the point where they're worried about collection actions because IRS is moving that quickly on it. Again, from October to now is lightning fast for the IRS, especially considering they shut down for at least half of December due to the holidays. So what letters do the IRS have to send? First of all, when they get your tax return, they have to send you an account due, a balance due letter. So again, be very careful. There are plenty of scams out there. You never, ever pay the IRS directly. If you get a letter that says, call us here, pay directly, it's not the IRS. The IRS will always direct you to irs.gov to make payments, or they'll give you one of their phone numbers to call. And when you call that number, it better be the IRS. Impersonating the IRS is a crime. So whatever you call that number, you need to ask them, is this the IRS? If not, tell them a fraud and hang up. There are a lot of tax debt relief companies as well as scams where they will pretend to be the IRS. They will send you letters that look like they're from the IRS. We kind of hashed this out before. And if they're not the IRS, I would not trust them as far as you can throw them. If you think they're the IRS, and we get calls where people think we're the IRS, but again, our ads, our commercials are nothing like that. And we're not sending out letters designed to scare people into calling us. But when you get legitimate letters from the IRS, don't ignore them. You need to respond. You need to address it. The sooner, the better. Don't wait till your house is already on fire, till you've already been levied, your bank account's cleared out, your wages garnished, and all that. Because then it's a lot harder, and you're already paying the price as soon as those start to hit. You're already getting hit with bank fees. You're going to have missed payments. Checks bounce, payments bounce. It's a mess. So that's why I highly recommend, as soon as you know you're going to have an issue, the sooner you call and get professional help, the better. I have people that don't even owe yet. They know they're going to owe and are calling and getting help. The beautiful part about that is we help them avoid all of this mess, all of these problems, and they end up with the same resolutions in the end, but it's a lot easier for them, a lot less strife and headache. So they'll send you a balance due notice. Don't ignore it. Don't throw it in the trash. And then they have to send you 3 notices of intent to levy. So when you start getting those notices of intent to levy, that's a sign, hey, something serious is happening here. I better pay attention. And that's why they're called notices of intent to levy. They're supposed to be they're supposed to be a warning. They're supposed to get you to call. So that's why a lot of these other companies will mimic that, will copy that, a lot of the same language. They'll threaten state tax warrants or a sheriff warrant, etc. Now and then the last, they send 2 notices of intent to levy, and it's the third one that you really have to watch out for. That's the final notice of intent to levy. So there's the 30-day timeline to respond on each one of these. If you don't respond in that timeline, the 30 days on the final one, that's where it's open season on you. That's when the IRS can hit you with levies, bank levies, wage garnishments. They can issue tax liens. It's open season. And to stop it, we're going to talk about how you need to stop it. Now, here's the fun part. State letters come in all shapes and sizes. And trust me, I have people that live all across the country, and they still get California Franchise Tax Board letters. So the Franchise Tax Board is their taxing agency. And so many people have left California or lived there once or flew in once or something, and then all of a sudden the state of California is trying to tax them. New York sends letters. They all send letters. And they have to give you proper notice before they start hammering you. Don't ignore them. And they will actually send the sheriffs out to your door to post a notice of a sheriff's warrant. So a lot of the same language that's on the state notices is what companies and scammers will use because it's varied. Now, one of the tricks to tell is if it says Pima County or such and such county tax lien or whatever, if it's the county where you live in, it's probably a scam or some lead generation company trying to get you to call them. So again, they come in all shapes and sizes, and there's some that look to be scams that were legitimate state tax notices. So you have to ask, who is this? Is this the IRS or the state? If it's not, hang up and get real representation. Someone that's not going to use tricks to try to get you to hire on. If that's how their hiring practices are, it usually doesn't get better through their process. A lot of people get hit though, and it's a surprise. I didn't get any notices. I didn't know what was going on. And this especially happens when the state or the IRS files for them. If you have years of unfiled returns, they're getting better and better at finding people. That's, a lot of the changes with Obamacare were all about trying to find people that are self-employed flying under the radar. So the IRS sees any transfer of $10,000 or more. That's anti-corruption law. It's been that way forever. But more and more, if businesses want to write off expenses, if they pay you, I think it's $600. It's a pretty low amount. If a business pays you that amount, they have to issue a 1099 to write that off as a business expense. Otherwise, they just eat it. They don't, they don't get the tax write-off or the business write-off. So more and more, if you are self-employed and you don't deal directly with the public, you work with any kind of companies or vendors, there will be 1099s. You might not know about them, but they're out there, and a lot of people get caught up in that. So again, there's W-2 reporting, there's 1099 reporting. It's rare that there's nothing on somebody. And so now Uber, Lyft, they're all issuing 1099s as well. So again, most of what you do, don't think the IRS doesn't know. They usually knows more than you would think they do. Now, it's very common that people aren't getting any letters. And then they're surprised when something hits them. They usually know there's something going on, there's a problem, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes something got put in their name. I have had plenty of cases where a 1099 or W-2 was issued in error, and that's fun to deal with. It's not. You can get it fixed, but it takes a lot of effort, and you have to get, again, disproving a negative is very difficult to do. So once you get in there and you show, so the problem with these letters is that once you get them, you need to respond. But if you never get them, the question is, why aren't you getting them? The number one reason is the IRS doesn't have your correct address. You've moved. You've changed places. Or the IRS mail is going somewhere else. Big problem with identity fraud is when someone takes over your identity and they change your address, it can redirect your mail. So normally, whenever you file your tax returns, if you're not getting anything and you're concerned, you can go online and through irs.gov, you can get in their portal, update your account, or on your most recent tax return, make sure you have your updated address so you are getting your mail. True story. We're coming up on a break, so good time for a true story. We had someone that we were trying to help. We had been working with them. We were getting ready to terminate them as a client because they just weren't responsive. They were responding to calls, emails, our letters, nothing. And the funny thing is, this guy was a Hispanic trucker. So there was a bit of a language barrier, but again, I speak Spanish. I'm fluent. And I was working with the legal team that all spoke Spanish. Language barrier shouldn't have been a problem. This guy being a trucker, he got in a truck, drove all the way from Texas to meet me in California. For him, driving across the country, no big deal. He had a briefcase full of IRS letters and our letters, most of them unopened. I was like, just open the letters and we'll call. We figure out, okay, this is how you want to communicate. But open those letters, call if you have questions, and we can make sure you're taken care of. So again, we're coming up on a break, and we will be back in 3 to 4 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to Taxes Made Easy. We're talking about the fun topics of collection actions by the IRS and state agencies. So I'm going to focus first on the IRS, but it really is very similar between the IRS and the states. So when you get these final notices of intent to levy, you've got to be paying attention to them. When you get the first one and you know there's trouble, that's when you really should reach out to a tax professional. People ask all the time, do I have to hire you now? The answer usually is no, you don't have to hire me now. But the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. And if you wait too long, it might be a huge problem. So we're going to take these on one by one. So wage garnishment. How do you release a wage garnishment? First of all, you have to be filing compliant and payment compliant. So if I mention those all the time, there's a reason for it because they're so important. If you don't have all your tax returns done, They can issue temporary relief. Used to be they wouldn't even talk to you. If you don't have your tax returns filed, forget about it. They're not going to help you. Things have changed over the years, the last 10 years, where they will talk to you. They will set up a temporary resolution, but you need to get those tax returns in and don't drag your feet. Let's get them done. There's plenty of tax professionals that can get them turned around on time. If you have a CPA that's dragging their feet, or if you're waiting on someone from whatever tax preparation company you're using, if they're not getting it done, if they're not communicating with you, get a second opinion. You can always go get your stuff and go somewhere else, or go get a second opinion. And there's times I've had them go somewhere else, get a second opinion, and the problem wasn't the tax preparer, it was the taxpayer. They were missing stuff. They didn't know, but there was a lack of communication. They were missing each other. So sometimes it helps to have a third party come in and say, hey, what do they need to do? Let's get it done. We will quarterback the whole thing. We'll talk to CPAs in a heartbeat as long as we have your permission, and make sure that we get what's needed and we move the case forward. So again, wherever there's a problem, you need someone to get in there, find the solution, and move the case forward, because this really will impact your home and your family. So get the tax returns done. Make sure you're paying regularly, because the IRS doesn't have to do squat for you if you're not payment compliant either. Now, when the levies hit, the IRS understands that it's hard to get compliant when you've already done that. So they will do a temporary fix, but you need to get that put together. Again, it's temporary. It's not a permanent fix. They will not give you a permanent resolution until you're filing compliant and payment compliant, which means if you're under withholding, you have to change your withholdings, and they need to see that change on your pay stubs. If you're not making estimated tax payments, they need to see that before you will get a permanent resolution. And what I mean by permanent resolution is an installment agreement, non-collectible status. And those are the two options when you're dealing with a bank levy and wedge garnishment, because you have to be dealing with collections. Collections in the IRS and with the states, they're the ones that issue the levies. They're the ones that do all that, and you have to resolve it with them. Once it's resolved, then you can consider doing an offer in compromise. But do not file an offer in compromise while you have collections actions going on. In very rare circumstances will we do that. The reason for it is, once that happens, collections, their hands are off the case, and you can't release a bank levy. You can't release a wage garnishment while that's going on. So you have to deal with collections. You have to work with them. You have to be filing compliant, payment compliant. Number 3, financials. So the financial analysis that we walked through for the offer and compromise, you have to put that together in most cases. So I'm just going to walk through your different options. First option, pay off the debt. You pay off the debt, that'll release the collection activities. Pure and simple. If you set up an installment agreement, again, we're going on installment agreements now, to pay the debt in full within 72 months. As long as the tax debt isn't expiring within those 72 months, that's an easy way to get the wage garnishment off, and move it to an installment agreement. If it's been a pain, if you've had defaulted installment agreements, if this has been an ongoing issue, the IRS frequently will not release the wage garnishment, but they will reduce it to the amount of the installment agreement. So the same thing happens, but the IRS is much more assured that they will get their money by doing this installment agreement through a wage garnishment. A lot of states, once they get a wage garnishment, they will not let it go, but they will reduce it. It takes more negotiating. You have to get in there and fight for it. But again, same things. You have to be filing compliant, payment compliant, and go through financials, unless you're full paying the liability. A lot of people, you can't full pay the liability of someone that they can afford to pay $500 a month, but they owe over $300,000. So they just don't have the money. Their income has gone down over the years post COVID. It's a very typical story, and they just don't have the funds that they used to. So going through your financial information, you can pay a lot less than what will cover the debt, but you have to prove it up to the IRS. So that's going through financial information and substantiating it. Now, the IRS has gotten better over the last 10 years, and this has been a slow evolution where they don't ask for nearly as much information. So you might not have to fax in pay stubs, bank statements, proof of all utilities, et cetera, like that. But you probably will have to send in, as long as the income you're reporting is similar to the previous year, your previous year tax return, you usually don't have to prove that up. The IRS usually does ask for bank statements, 3 months of bank statements. There's times you can get around to that, but be ready to submit paperwork. Don't mail it in. You want to fax it in, ideally to the person on the phone when you call in. And if you're releasing wage garnishments, bank levies, you have to call in. So again, this is why it's so key. If you can't get through, Monday, Tuesdays are the worst days to call the IRS. You can try throughout the day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but the best time to get through is Wednesday through Friday between 5 to 7 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, you can get through. I mean, we get through on a regular basis. But when you call in, you're not going to be talking to the normal people, the people in collections. You're going to be talking to the first layer or two of bureaucracy in the IRS, and you have to tell them, send me to collections. Because these first couple layers can give you information, but that's about it. You have to get to collections. And sometimes they'll transfer you to someone else. Ask them, is this collections? If they say no, I'm trying to get to collections. I have this collection actions going on. Please send me to collections. And they should transfer you on. There's some people that will try to go through the rigmarole and, ask for your social name, address, all that jazz before they transfer you on. Just try to get moved on to the people that will actually can help you out. So once you're talking to collections, they're going to ask, for your situation. This is where it really pays to have a professional. If you say the wrong thing, if you overshare, if you don't understand the allowable amounts, they can tell you that you have to pay this much. And a lot of times they will give you bad information. I've had little old ladies on Social Security couldn't afford to run 2 times together, and they always set them up on a payment plan. Sometimes it was just for a few $100s, but it was a few $100s they did not have. They could not afford to pay. They called us and would say, yeah, we see this all the time. We'll put you in a non-collectible status where you don't have to pay anything. Or they'll tell someone, look, you have to pay $1,000 a month. And someone goes, what? Get a second opinion. Get a second opinion if they're telling you have to pay more than you can actually afford. Now, there are times where people are spending too much in one area or another. Housing and utilities is a classic example right now where I have someone living in Vegas. They're paying $3,200 just in rent alone for a couple and 2 children, 4 people. That's Vegas right now. The IRS is completely out of touch, and they're saying the whole thing should cost around $2,200, including all her utilities, phone, cable, internet, all of her expenses. She's spending over $4,000, and they're giving her credit for about half of it. So, understanding where you can get more expenses, how to best help you out, really, really makes a difference here. So, moving forward, you have to show that you can afford the monthly payments, go through the financial analysis, and then you need once they agree, okay, we see that you can't afford to pay anything or that you can only pay so much. We will either release or reduce the wage garnishment. You have to have a fax number for your employer. So if it's a small person, that just might be the office fax. If it's a small shop, if it's a larger company, you have to go to your HR department and ask for the fax number for levy releases or wage garnishment releases. They will often have a dedicated fax. The bigger the company, they'll have a fax number for that goes directly to their HR unit that processes wage garnishment releases. The smaller, whoever's handling HR at your company, they should be the ones, or payroll. They need to be the ones to get the fax. So the IRS, and especially the states, do not like to send them directly to you or your representative. They want to send it directly to your employer. If the faxes do not work, if you make multiple attempts, you can give them a fax number that goes directly to you or your representative, ideally your representative. What employers don't like is if you walk in with the letter and say, hey, I got this from the IRS. Like, well, you're handing it to me. I should be getting it directly from the IRS. So try to get it faxed directly to your HR department to get that wage garnishment released or reduced. And then that will greatly help. Now, one of the things to be concerned about, certain types of pay, like if you get paid once a month from the government or Social Security, it can take the Social Security 45 days to process a wage garnishment release. That means during that time period, you're probably going to get hit again. This is why it's always better to get ahead of this stuff and avoid it from the get-go. So, because the wage garnishment continues long term, that's why you have to get in there, and they will release it if you show that you can't afford to make those payments. I just had something. So as far as, so make sure you have that payroll number, make sure your employer is aware that it's coming, and then verify, make sure your employer gets it and they process it. So that's one of the number one things we tell people. Hey, this wage garnishment is supposed to come. If they don't get it, call the IRS back and say, hey, we need you to resend it. Call the state back. Whoever's issuing the wage garnishment release, you have to verify that the employer gets it and that they process it. So can the IRS take your whole paycheck? Normally, no. Normally, they can only take 50% of your net amount, your take-home amount from your paycheck. Now, there are big, wide exceptions to that. If you have a spouse that makes a lot of money, or if they think you have additional income, if they think you're driving for Uber or something and they don't know about this income, they can come in and hit your whole check. And that hurts. So if you call them up right away and say, hey, I'm not doing that anymore. This is all the income I have. They might ask for your bank statements to prove and show that you don't have anything else coming through, and then they'll release it. But this is why it's so important to have clean bank statements. Don't play funny games with your bank statements, people. If you're transferring money back and forth to your brother, sister, Joe, or whoever, make sure you're keeping good track. Make sure you're not mixing business and personal expenses. If you have a business, get a separate business account. Doesn't matter how small of a side business it is. And it will help you see if this thing is costing you money or if it's actually profitable for you. And you can, if it's costing you money and it's a hobby and you have the money for it, have fun, enjoy it. If it's supposed to be a business and you're trying to write off business expenses, it is absolutely important that you keep track of it. So the next topic we're going to talk about is bank levies. The standard for releasing bank levies is different than a wage garnishment. It's a one-time thing. It's nasty, but the IRS looks at it as it's a one-time thing. If you have plenty of money in the bank, if you have plenty of other stuff going on, you have other income, the IRS will usually tell you, and the states are more strident about this, or harder to get the bank levies released. Suck it up. You're going to get another paycheck in a week or 2 weeks. So the standard for releasing a bank levy is that you have to have an immediate need for that money. Most people have plans for it, but if it's to go on Disneyland or go on a vacation, the IRS doesn't care. Pay your taxes is going to be their response. You need to show that you need those funds for necessary and reasonable business expenses. Well, not business, but necessary and reasonable personal expenses. Now, when businesses get levied, same standard. It has to be necessary and reasonable for the business. So let's talk about the personal standard first. And we are coming up on another break in a couple minutes. The IRS frequently wants to see past due debts. This is the actual standard, and it's tougher than what they actually demand most of the time. But if you're in the hot water and the IRS is mad at you, or you've really ticked off a revenue officer, they can absolutely stick this standard to you. If you have past due bills, past due rent, past due utilities, vehicle payments that are past due, student loan payments, health insurance, that's past due. That is the actual standard. If you have those payments that are past due and you're facing eviction, you're going to lose your health insurance, you're going to lose other important things that are reasonable and necessary for your livelihood and well-being, they will release that bank levy. If not, then you're essentially begging the IRS to do what they don't have to do. So keep that in mind. I've gotten plenty released on bank levy releases that I should have never gotten released. I had one gentleman, wrap up with the story before the next break. Of course, he was an attorney. Attorneys make the worst clients. I joke about it, but that's because it's true. So he had $17,000 in the bank. And I'd already told him, hey, if you have a chunk of money and you have it sitting in a bank account, especially more than $10,000, the IRS can sees it, and they'll take it. His bank account was levied. He called and said, I know you told me, you warned me about this. So I called the revenue officer, begged and pleaded. I got $9,000 of it released. She didn't have to release a dime. But I was sweet as pie. I whined, I complained, but I was just like, look, this is a situation, he needs this, this, and this. And I had to lay out how much he actually needed. And so she released half of it. She got her pound of flesh. He was happy. The client was happy. I got something released, just over half of it. But the IRS did not have to release that. So we're going to continue talking about levy releases and how to negotiate that when we come back in just a few seconds. Welcome back, everybody. So, we're talking about the fun of bank levies. So, what is a bank levy? And let's talk about the timeline here. So, we talked about the standard for releasing bank levies, and it's much higher than a wage garnishment because it's a one time thing. And if you have a bunch of money sitting there, you need to have a persuasive argument to get in there. And a lot of this is persuasive negotiating because the standard is pretty tough. The actual standard in the IRM is very high. You have to have past due bills for necessary expenses that, things that you can't live without, electric, water. If the TV bill is overdue, telephone is overdue, you kind of need a telephone to get by. But those past due bills. Now, do I get plenty of levies released without past due bills? Yes, absolutely. But if you've ticked off the IRS or you've had a long history of problems and they stick by that strict standard, there's not a lot you can do besides, again, try to negotiate with them to get what you can released. Sometimes you don't want to sound like you're begging and pleading, but essentially understand the position you're coming from. If you're in a position of strength, then you can argue from a position of strength. But if you don't have a solid position, approach it very differently. I approach things very differently depending on, do I have the law behind me, or do I have very powerful facts that follow the law, or am I in a position right now I'm kind of begging and pleading to get what I can? And you can get someone to split the baby. Again, it is IRS, but you're still dealing with people. And as long as you can get them on your side, someone's, got a health issue or something going on and they need medical treatment or care, people understand that they do have some leeway there. So once a bank levy hits your bank account, you are racing against the clock. I understand that. So this is not a time to play around. This is not a time to ignore stuff. For the IRS, it's 21 calendar days. You have 21 calendar days to get in there and contest that levy. Most states, it's 7 to 10 business days, 2 weeks. And that's from when the notice arrives at your bank. So how a bank levy operates is that the IRS will send out this notice of bank levy directly to any bank that has your social security number. If you don't have anything in account, or if it's protected funds like just disability, there's times the bank will say, we're not honoring this. But most times, and this goes for wage garnishments, if someone does not honor a wage garnishment or bank levy, they become liable. So that's why the banks, their hands are usually tied. And that's why banks will be very cautious about bank levies. And sometimes they will overreact and not do things correctly because they don't understand. This is not, the smaller the bank is, the less often they deal with it. So whoever you're talking to in the branch, you have to talk to a manager. You frequently have to have them get on the phone with someone higher up the chain that understands this process. So the levy hits and it freezes what's in that account the day that it hits, the day the bank gets that letter and opens it. Okay, now we have to go freeze that account. The way it's supposed to operate is it's only supposed to freeze what's in the account at the time the levy hits. So if you go in after levy hits and you deposit another $5,000 so all your checks don't bounce, you should be able to do that. You should be able to use your account normally, except for what was in the account when the bank levy hit. Banks get it wrong all the time, especially smaller banks that don't know better. So if someone has a smaller bank, a credit union, etc., I tell them, go ask them how they're going to treat it. Make sure they know how to do it right, because banks will be overly cautious and they will freeze what's put in there later as well. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's something to be wary about. So if you're going to go deposit money so you can still use that account and everything doesn't bounce, check with your bank manager. Talk to someone that knows and says, hey, you're not going to freeze this as well, are you? And if you do, you might need to, then you need to climb the chain to their corporate, or you need to raise some holy hell with them and make sure that they understand what they're doing wrong and fix it. Or you might need to switch banks. And banks are not very sympathetic when people get hit with bank levies, et cetera, unless you're a very big customer. So they'd rather not deal with it, to be honest. So when the levy hits, you're usually notified. They're supposed to issue a letter to you, the bank does, saying, hey, you just got hit with the levy. That letter can take 2 to 3 days to get to you. And if you only have 7 to 10 days with states or 21 days with the IRS, that clock's ticking. I have people call me, hey, I get this letter. When did you get it? Oh, I got it 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago? Okay, you might have a week. We have to get on this right away. We have to call. I mean, you've got to jump on that right away. You need someone that's going to be calling the IRS, calling the state within days, not weeks. So for our process and anybody else, we have to send the power of attorneys to them, get them to sign that as well as a fee agreement or some kind of contract, get those back signed, and then we can move forward on the case. You can do it all by email and fax, which is very helpful. But as long as there are companies, we try to do this. If someone calls in and they have a levy, we'll send the stuff to them. They can send it right back right away. But as long as they've actually hired us and made payment, we can call the same day or the next day. So if you're hiring someone and you have a bank levy, you need to make sure they're going to be on top of it, because there's limited time to respond. So again, you've got to be have someone that's on top of it, that's calling the IRS, calling the state, and they understand the standards. They understand how this needs to be negotiated. So again, there's a fax number for the bank, just like HR for wage garnishments. The banks will have a fax number, and you have to get that from the bank. Depending on the state, some states will already have the fax number. If it's Wells Fargo, Chase, a bigger bank like that, and they already have it. The IRS pretty much always wants you to give them the fax number. So ask for the moment you know that you have a bank levy. Go into your branch, call them, and get the fax number to get that levy released. Once you do the negotiation with the IRS, you want to already have that number. If you go negotiate with the states to get that released, you should already have that number when you call them. So once you call, you go through the numbers and you say, hey, I need it released. You go through your financial information to show that overall you can't afford it. And then boom, boom, boom. These are my immediate bills. This is what I really need the money for. Then you can get that levy released, and it will be faxed to that fax number that you give them. Verify, verify, verify. I repeated 3 times, and I said the same thing for wage garnishments. Just because they say they're issuing it, the IRS and even states are riddled with incompetence. They have machines that don't work. They try, or it doesn't go through. The fax number you were given is incorrect, or it gets faxed to your bank and someone's not paying attention at your bank. You have to be the squeaky wheel, because your bank isn't going to talk to your representative. Just like when you're talking to your representative, everything's confidential there. I don't talk to anybody without permission from my clients. That's attorney-client privilege. With your bank, you have to call them, confirm that they got the bank levy release, and confirm that it's processed. Once they get it, the bank gets it and processes it, great. Then you should have your funds again. If it's a full release, great. If it's a partial release, whatever's still frozen, they can go ahead and remit to the IRS or state. So for the IRS or state, it's not money in hand until it's actually remitted to them or sent to them. But once the money is sent to them, there's no gratitude. There's like, okay, we'll work with them because we just took 30,000. Their perspective is we had to grab 30,000 from them that they weren't expecting. I just had a client, didn't tell us they had over $45,000 in their accounts. And yes, they owed us money too. Owed the CPA money too. And they, instead of paying their necessary bills, make sure that they didn't have that money available for the IRS came in and grabbed $45,000. Due to the history, due to the, again, they had given them plenty of time to get filing compliant, payment compliant. They'd had well over a year, hadn't done it. We had warned them. The IRS didn't release any of the $45,000. So there's no guarantee they're going to release bank levy funds. The harder your case is, the crazier it is. Again, don't wait till the last minute. And I say that on every case. So I want to talk about businesses real quick. So that is very, very important. Bank levies can kill businesses. So what can a business do about a bank levy? Same thing. You have to prove up, hey, we need those funds. There are things the IRS is very sensitive to when it comes to business. Number one, payroll. If you need to pay your employees, they will usually release the funds needed directly for payroll. And they want a dollar amount. They say, hey, I need this much for this. I need this much for this. Don't give them a round number. Say, hey, these are the numbers. They won't go into it that much. But if you have specific numbers, they will likely release it. If you have payroll, if you have vendors that need to be paid, it has to be reasonable. But they won't release it for everything or all the business expenses that a business needs. And if a business has a bad history, it's less likely that they'll release it. So I'm going to finish up with, and we're going to have to continue this because I haven't covered it. And again, there's so much to cover. But I want to talk about, when is it too late? It's too late to release levies when all that has gone through, when the money's actually being remitted. The true story here, if you have a revenue officer or you're getting notices to seize property, you can be getting to that point where it's too late for me to help you. So true story, business had been playing around for years. They hired a bunch of different firms. That's always a bad sign. If it will buy you a little bit of time to go and hire a new firm, but all it does is tick off the people at the IRS. They're not serious about it. They're just playing around. And the IRS knows when they're being played with, and they do not like it. So I got assigned to a new case, called the revenue officer up, and her first comment was, there's no way you're going to get a stay of execution on this one. Stay of execution, and I laughed. What else was I supposed to do? So and she says, well, why are you laughing? I was like, well, I've never heard of it referred to like that. She chuckled and she goes, well, they have it coming. And they did. So again, I poured on my charm, sweet talked her, and I got a 2-week stay of execution. Everything was due Friday morning in her office. As soon as I got off the phone with her, I picked up the phone. I was calling them. I called the main line. I called the secretary's line. I dug up one of the owner's phone numbers, cell numbers. I blew up their phones. I sent them texts. I was sending them mail, and they didn't respond. Friday morning, I got a call from them. Now they respond. $140,000 was levied out of their accounts. It was all completely frozen. And their very first question was, how did I let this happen? Oh, they were going to blame me all day long. I said, hold the phone. Where have you guys been? And if someone's not keeping detailed notes on your case and they can't tell you exactly what they've been doing, fire them, get someone new. I had detailed records of every call I made, every letter I sent. I filled up the secretary's voicemail. Then I went to the next one. I'm like, where have you guys been? I've been blowing up your phones. I've sent you letters. No response. Oh, our secretary was out. Well, who's answering the phones? Very quickly, they realized it was on them. And again, I'm not trying to pass the buck to clients or blame them. I'm always very solution oriented. But this time they had really ignored their attorney, their representative. Don't do that. Work with your attorney. Their only option at this point was to go file a business bankruptcy. I had another case, and again, don't have time to get into the details, but they were going to pay us $7,000. They were way too far past what I could do to help them. He came back. I told him, go file for business bankruptcy. Do it now. It was a Friday afternoon, of course. He came back and said, the guy who wants $20,000 to do it. I said, pay the man. I can't stop you. You're about to have all of your inventory cleared up. Pay him. And he had to. Don't wait. Be proactive. It will save you tons of money, tons of heartache by doing it right and get ahead of it. Again, we'll continue the conversation next or tomorrow. Hubert Johnson here, Taxes Made Easy.